Okay, Mapcode F. Hobgoblin Forge. The cut stone passageway gives way to a naturally formed cavern. A dozen hobgoblins work a forge here where coal is burned and steel is hammered. A massive barrel-chested hobgoblin wears a leather apron and holds a blacksmith's hammer. He seems to be directing the others. Two hobgoblin sentries wearing lamellar, accompanied by two wargs, watch the east passage. They're staring at you. The wargs growl threateningly as soon as the party is seen. The hobgoblins lower their crossbows and call out in a common tongue. Who are you? Lucien's voice interrupts any reply from the party. What's it to you, pigface? Why are a bunch of orcs down here in the dungeon? The hobgoblins flash boil in anger, always the enemy of orcs. We're not orcs. They pull the triggers on their crossbows. The wargs bound forward. The workers behind them scramble for weapons. It will take them 3 rounds to arm themselves with weapons and shields. It's on. It's important to note you're going to be joined by a couple of benefactors. Fidrip and Dugout are going to join your party, and Fidrip and Dugout can be read about here. Fidrip is a channel of the Fun tribe of goblins. He is a wolf lord of Maglumiet, and Dugout is his wolf companion, and they're going to aid in the combat. So the first thing you do before you actually begin combat is when you go to the adventure workbook, you update party, and then you can add Fidrip to your party. There he goes. And Dugout. Like I said before, we built this adventure to really tax all the different features of the adventure workbook, and one of those features is being able to add party members to the party as and remove them as time goes on. And so the party members, you've now added those 2 in there. Now if you remember, there's that 3-round scenario where the hobgoblin workers are not going to be in the blacksmith are not going to be involved. The blacksmith is actually called a hobgoblin shaper. And so one of the tricks you do there for that is you can just go in and skip them, but they'll keep coming out and it'll just be kind of annoying. We do not want to load up past encounter this time, but we will here in a second want to, because what we're going to do is we're going to do F, and that creates all these characters, but we're going to end the combat immediately, and we're going to go to teleporter, and we're going to go to the combat sheet. And now we can see all these guys here, but there's something called end cap rounds here. And if we go to the end cap round, and so the shaper, that's the blacksmith, we put a 3 in there because it's going to take them 3 rounds to get going. And then all these workers, we put 3s in their column and fill down. So now we've essentially taken these guys out of the fight for 3 rounds. And so when we're going through, you will get an update about how they're getting closer and closer to combat, but it is a much faster way and informative way to keep track of what's going on with these out of combatants soon to join the fight villains. So that's one way we do it. So now when we go back to a combat, we do want to reload from the last encounter. And so we're in there, and Hobgoblin Sentry can go do what he needs to do. So we're not going to go through this whole combat. I am going to show you kind of just a detailed way about how this combat worked. Well, so in our party, Claith is not up front. In our party, it's here, and Grazzle is usually flanking him. So these guys took the crossbow bolts, and then these guys start coming up. And I think Fidrip got a fairly good roll in here, and this is 5 and 6. This is Fidrip being added. Again, you have this feature where you just don't have enough room for all these combatants. So I like to just kind of keep them off the side in a reserve. But these guys aren't doing anything for 3 rounds. And so what happened here is it was a tough, long war of attrition. But with Fidrip and Dugout, they came in and they took these 2 guys away. And so the Warg and the sentry I had was blue, and the Warg here were fighting Grazel and Robert, which supported Robert. Grazel and Robert were supported in the back by Autumn and Claith. Claith was firing out magic missiles, and Autumn was firing her short bow into the combat, and they were able to kind of knock these guys out, form a defensive wedge. Fidrip is very tough and with his flame arrows, and he is able to knock that down, and we kind of got into a scenario here. These took longer, and then it just became hobgoblins fighting, moving up, filling the breach. But through time, through a lot of cures, a lot of hits, a lot of spell points, the guys were all done. And important to note is that when you do kill somebody, you can just right-click in the adventure board, and it will gradually reduce the amount of combatants you're having to deal with. And that's basically how the combat went, is that there was a war of attrition, but the good guys won.